Hello, thanks for joining me today. I'm Pat Speth, the author of the Nickel Quilt books, and in case you don't know what a nickel quilt is, it's simply a quilt that we can make using 5-inch squares of fabrics. And I use the 5-inch squares of fabrics a lot in the quilts that I make. You can utilize the charm packs, all those charm packs we have out on the market. You can use layer cakes. You can cut a layer cake up into 4 or 5-inch squares. You can cut back quarters into 5-inch squares. And of course you can use your stash fabrics. So now that you know what a nickel quilt is, we're going to get started on today's quilt.
The block I'm going to demo for you today is in the Heritage Trail quilt. The size shown here is the lap size. All the information for making this quilt in 3 different sizes can be found in the Amazing Nickel Quilt book. Ordering information will be at the end of this video. The 3 sizes are lap, twin, and queen. And because it's fun to see what the quilt looks like in different color combinations, I played with these blocks in Electric Quilt, and here are some fun color options. Teal and orange fabrics would look great, or a pink and green combination, and of course you can't go wrong with blue and yellow.
If you enjoyed seeing the extra colorways that this Heritage Trail quilt could be made in, please leave a comment in the comment section below. That way I know if viewers enjoy it, that feature, I'll try to include that in future videos. The Heritage Trail quilt is made out of 2 different blocks. It's the positive and negative variation of the very same block. And now we're going to switch to the overhead cam so that you can see what these blocks look like. Each of the blocks contain 6 half-square triangles in the blues and the creams, and 3 4-patches with the reds and the background fabric. One block, the half-square triangles are pointing in towards the center of the block, with the creams running through on the diagonal. The other block, the half-square triangles are pointing away from the center of the block, and we have all those wonderful reds running through on the diagonal. To get started with this block, I'm going to start with the half-square triangles. For my block, I wanted it really scrappy. I wanted to have all 6 of my half-square triangles out of a different blue. So to do that, I'm starting with 3 prints, 3 plaids, and a total of 6 background fabrics. Now when combining these and making half-square triangles, that is actually going to yield 12 half-square triangles. That will be enough for 2 blocks. For the half-square triangles, I am combining 1 blue fabric, 1 background fabric, and I am going to draw a diagonal line on the back of that. My very favorite marking tool in the whole wide world is just a number 2 mechanical pencil. So on the wrong side of that background fabric, drawing a diagonal line, making sure it's dark enough that I can see it when I go to stitch these together, right sides together, nestling those fabrics, making sure the edges are aligned really nice all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and stitch a scant 1/4 of an inch on each side of that diagonal line, and I'll be right back. Now for my half-square triangles, I've gone ahead and stitched that scant 1/4 of an inch along each side of the diagonal line. Now before I cut this on the diagonal line, I like to set the seam with the iron just for, a couple of seconds. To me, setting the seam lets the seam know who is boss. Now that the seam has been set, I'm ready to cut the unit in half along the diagonal line that I drew on there to begin with. Cut that. Once I have them cut, I am now ready to do some more pressing, and I'm going to press to the dark on both of these units. I've already set that seam, so now I just have to press. To do that, I am just very gentle with my units because I am using steam. So just putting that iron on there just for a second or two, pressing that to the dark, grabbing the next one that's ready to go, pressing that back. Okay, both of the units have been pressed to the dark. Now I'm ready to trim. Now to trim up this unit, we are going to be trimming it to 4.5 inches square. I'll show you first how to do that with a 6-inch ruler. The diagonal seam line is heading in this direction. I'm going to be placing the diagonal line of the ruler on top of that, having the unit extend out for the first part of the trimming past the 4.5-inch lines on the inside of the ruler, and it extends past the outside edges, 2 outside edges of the rulers by just a little bit. Trimming up, trimming over, pressing harder on those dog ears, then lift the ruler, lift the unit, we switch those out of the way. I have given the unit a complete turn. The diagonal is still heading in the same direction. Now, how I line up the ruler for the second part of the trimming is I put my nice trimmed edge on the side and my nice trimmed edge on the bottom on the 4.5-inch lines of the rulers, on this edge over here, 4.5-inch line of the ruler on the bottom. Then the last thing I look at is, did my diagonal line fall into place? It did. So I'm going to be trimming up and over. And that creates a perfect half-square triangle unit. Now, sometimes we get tired of looking for the 4.5-inch lines on the 5-inch, the 6-inch, or the 6.5-inch rulers. So, probably the easiest way to trim these half-square triangles up to the 4.5 inches square is to have and use a 4.5-inch square ruler. I'm going to show you that now. Okay, I'm ready to trim up this second triangle using a 4.5-inch square ruler. I have also switched the mat. I've gone to a smaller mat because all we have to do is place the ruler once when we're using the 4.5-inch ruler. Placing the ruler just once, the diagonal line on the ruler goes right on top of my diagonal seam line, and my unit extends past the ruler just a little bit on all 4 edges. I will trim up and over on 2 edges, always pressing harder on those dog ears. Then, since I've put it on a smaller mat, I can easily turn this mat, leaving the ruler in place, trimming up and over again. And there we have another perfect 4.5-inch half-square triangle unit. Once I've made a bunch of the blue and cream half-square triangles, then it's time to move on to 4 patches. Now, to make the 4 patch, we want this to end up 4.5 inches, unfinished, so it'll match in size to these wonderful half-square triangles we've just trimmed up to 4.5 inches. To do this, we do need to start with 5-inch squares that are an accurate 5-inch square. Our seam allowances need to be a nice, accurate, scant 1/4 inch. Our cutting needs to be nice and accurate. It's just paying attention to the details throughout the whole construction process on this. To get started, I am going to start with a red square and a background square. I am going to put these right sides together, and I am going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on this edge and a scant 1/4 inch on this edge. I'll do that and I'll be right back. I have gone ahead and stitched my scant 1/4 inch on opposite edges. Now it's time to measure over 2.5 inches and cut. 2.5 inches from this edge here, And if this is the first time you're making 4 patches this way, may I suggest using what I refer to as the 2-ruler method to line your rulers up to make sure you're lining them up correctly. Because if you are positioning the ruler over just a little bit too much, making one side a little too heavy, you're going to be shortening up this other side. So you could quickly grab another ruler, put that down to make sure that what you have left after you trim is also going to be the 2.5 inches. So go ahead and trim. Now those are ready to be pressed. Ready to press these 2 patch units. Just set that seam for 1 second. Push that fabric back with my fingers. Gently give this a press. The same with my other one. Set that seam. And pressing to the dark. These are now ready to be combined with a couple of more 2 patches in the reds and the creams. My 4 patches, I wanted them to be scrappy, 2 different reds, 2 different background fabrics. So once I have an assortment of these made, then I start combining and seeing and just grouping some together. Once I've decided on the 2 that I'm going to be putting together, then it is placing them right sides together. And with the dark against the light and light against the dark, nestling these. And before I stitch, I probably would put a pin here to hold that in place and a pin down here to hold that in place. And these are the 2 edges I'm going to be stitching together. I've stitched along each of these edges here, that scant 1/4 inch seam. Now I am ready to measure over the 2.5 inches and cut again. So measuring 2.5 inches from this edge. Go ahead and cut. And then we are ready to press. For the pressing, I set that seam. Open them up, gently finger press those back, give that a nice press. And I always love it when my points turn out, when those seams have matched really nice for me. Okay, these are pressed, ready to be combined with some more 4 patches and these half square triangles into one of the blocks. I have selected 6 of the half square triangles in the blues and the creams for this block, and 3 of the 4 patches. The half square triangles are all pointing in towards the center of the block, and I have my creams running along that diagonal. And how I'm going to sew this together, I'm going to go ahead, so I'm going to sew this together in 3 rows. I'm going to join these 2 fabrics together first, these 2 units, and then these 2 units, keeping the chain in between. So I'm going to go ahead and get those ready to send through my machine. And I will be right back. I've gone ahead and sewn the units together into the 3 rows, leaving the chain of the stitching in between and not clipping that. I am ready to press these guys. To do this, I lay them out like this, set those seams, set this other column of seams. And now for the pressing on this block, I've worked it out in the instructions because we are dealing with the 2 different blocks, the positive and negative version of the very same block. And I've worked the pressing out that once you set the blocks row to row well, block to block and then row to row, and giving every other one a quarter of a turn, I've worked out the pressing that the seams are all going to be going opposite. So for this one, I am going to go ahead and press the seams out. And when I'm pressing the seams like this, I do usually do it from the back of the block so I can see those seams. That set of seams. Okay, so these are going out. And then so the next row goes in. And the next row goes out. Once those are all nicely set, I am ready then to sew, to go ahead and finish sewing the block together by sewing the 3 rows together. I'll sew that seam and I'll sew that seam, and I'll be right back. I've gone ahead and I have stitched the rows together and pressed them. The center rows were pressed to the center of the block, and all my half square triangles are heading in the right direction. My cream colored fabrics in those 4 patches are all going through the diagonal. So in my world, that is a success. That's a great looking block. And that is all there is to making this block. Now for those of you that are newer to scrap quilting and would like a look at the fabrics that I chose to put into this quilt, the variety of the fabrics, coming up next I have some photos for you to look at.
When choosing the fabrics for this quilt, the colors were simple, since I went with the blue and red color theme. Within the colors, though, I have a big variety of tones, from nice, clear, bright blues to more grayed-out blues and deep navy. And the same with the reds, everything from sharp, clear reds to some that are closer to rust or even burgundy. I used a mixture of prints and plaits. The prints include 1800s reproduction fabrics as well as more modern-looking fabrics and tone-on-tones. I also like to use a variety in the scale of prints, always including everything from small calicos up to medium scale and then larger scale prints. There is also a large assortment of background fabrics in this quilt. I like the extra texture it adds to the look. If you don't have the largest assortment of fabrics that I have, don't worry. This quilt still looks great in a limited number of fabrics.
If you enjoyed today's demo, please remember to subscribe to my Nickel Quilt channel so that you will be notified of more videos that I will be posting. Coming up next is just ordering information on the Amazing Nickel Quilt book, the book that all the information for the Heritage Trail Quilt is in. Thanks for watching today, and have fun making your nickel quilt.
All the information for making the Heritage Trail Quilt in 3 different sizes can be found in the Amazing Nickel Quilt book. This book, as well as my other books and patterns, can be ordered from my website. Purchases from my website will help fund the creation and production of more nickel quilt videos for all to enjoy and learn from. Thank you.